creators here, I still have a full-time like job, and I do a lot of other things. And so like for me, like to squeeze in the small amount of time I have into doing like any kind of content creation is a very valuable amount of time. And so for me, I pretty much like kind of approach it from like the theatrical side, where like, you know, people like spike their floor to know the position of things, you know. So for example, I know like where to put my tripod, where to face things, like certain angles and stuff that just works. And that system was really because for example, a lot of the photography I do for it's like for a lot of the builds I'm doing is really out of a courtesy. I just want to offer the people I build keyboards for just an opportunity to showcase their keyboard. Like if they say, oh, hey, like I had Lightning build this keyboard for me, and let me actually show you a photo. And then if it's just them, they might be like, oh, I never took a photo of my keyboard. But if I took some photos for them, they can be like, oh yeah, it's like right there on the website or on the Instagram or whatever. And so I do it as a courtesy. I don't charge people for it. I mean, nowadays I just began to charge like vendors and designers because it's like promotional content, right? But you know, this kind of came about just as a way for me to thank other people. And then, I mean, I can't really speak much for the cinematography side because I'm very unacquainted with it. And I actually, like, anytime I see BadSeed's videos, I'm like, wow, that's really awesome. Like, there's a style to it. I think a lot of the chops that come into pretty much any kind of creative work is that you know someone has really worked on their craft when you can identify their work immediately by their style. That's like the secret sauce of creative work, is that you see something and you say, I can associate this content with that particular person, and nobody else does this exact same thing. And I think that's sort of what's influenced my view on things that I do, is that, yeah, I would love for people to kind of know that something that I do is unique to myself, and not just for, like, you know, boosting my own pride or ego or anything like that. It's more so that it would be nice for people to sort of like recognize that, you know, everyone has kind of like their own approach to creating something and to putting it out there. And for me, like, I do acknowledge that, like, I would love to learn new skills like cinematography, or maybe explore on the photography side a lot more. I know that a lot of people have certain photographers that they admire. You know, they might follow on Instagram, or back then, like maybe Flickr or something like that. But yeah, I think just given the limited amount of time I have, it's like what I've made out of it.
I mean, when people ask me, do you have a picture of your board? I show them pictures you took. So they put my pictures to shame, that's for sure.
That's great.
And BadSeed, but yours is definitely more cinematography. Your videos are beautiful. So
thank you. Yeah, it was, when I got into content creation, it was like the summer of 2015. And back then there was a really clear division between people that, like, you could look at a channel and say this is a professional YouTube channel if the cinematography was at a certain level, because the camera technology back then wasn't, like, we weren't on 4K. There, you know, and the barrier of entry was a lot higher, because to get cameras that could present that, it cost a significant amount of money. And so that was one barrier. I didn't know anything about it. I never used a DSLR when I got into it. It was just something that I looked at content creators like Ali from Optimum Tech, Dimitri from Hardware Canucks. Like, these are the guys that, for me, from a cinematic standpoint, really paved the way. Dimitri's early case reviews are like Oscar-worthy. Great, yeah, amazing stuff. So it kind of started there, and just being like, all right, if I'm going to come out and I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to take it seriously, then I want to be viewed seriously. So I really have to put some time into developing that craft. And I mean, this next part, it's going to sound cheesy, but what happened when I started doing that was that not every designer out there who's releasing a product has access to a marketing budget, or 3D designers or photographers or videographers. Like, they're not the Razors, they're not the Corsairs, you know? And a lot of what was happening is I would take the time to showcase a product that, like, if you've ever designed a product in your life, you know, like, you lose sleep over the littlest details, like the degree of that curve and whatever. Like, people really pour a lot into that. And the first time I took a shot for somebody, or just took some video for somebody, and they were floored to see the product that they had made showcased in that way, that was huge. And so after that, it was like, it just became about, I don't know, chasing that. I think it creates something visually compelling for the viewer to watch, and it shows a certain amount of respect to the work that went into the product.
absolutely. And so this last question from us before I start getting to y'all guys' questions for Osiris and Apiary. content creation, it's about getting viewership. It's about getting viewers. And while I'm sure all of us can sit here and list off the people that have, like the OG people who've been here from the beginning, not only do you have to keep those people interested for 3+ years, but you also have to keep creating content that's going to grow and keep bringing in new people. So how has it been creating that content? What's some advice you can give to people that are wanting to start, who were kind of thinking, how do I get followers? How do I get people? Like, because I still can't believe that people watch us. Like, we'll start with Apiary.
Sure. I think ultimately I have a few pieces of advice. I think really the proper true answer to that question is just care about your audience, care about the people who are watching your stuff, and as long as you do that, to be frank, you'll be fine. I think every time I've ever seen a content creator get into this space thinking that, oh, I just want to do this as my job and that's it. I don't really care about the people who watch my stuff. Obviously, they don't say that. But whenever that's their attitude, they inevitably fail because people can tell that you don't care about them, right? Ultimately, I think as long as you care about the people who are consuming your content, you'll do just fine. Everything else is completely secondary. I think the other thing too, I think this was already touched upon, is be true to yourself. I think one of the biggest things that happens to content creators who get in this space is they burn out. It's really hard to exist in this space. I think everybody here would agree with that. And so ultimately, you have to do what you enjoy, kind of regardless of whether it's what's cool or what's getting viewers. Ultimately, truly, the way to get viewers and to get a following is to not chase viewers or a following. And then, of course, there's the small little tricks. I mean, obviously, you can't completely ignore what is going on, right, in the wider keyboard world. You can't just do what you want to do. But as long as you just keep true to yourself, I know it's so cheesy, but as long as you keep true to yourself and you care about the people who are watching your stuff, I think you'll be just fine.
And Osiris?
Yeah, so to go off of caring about your viewers, if someone comes in, say you're streaming, it's your first time, you've got a couple viewers, someone types in chat, have a conversation with them. Be open, be accepting to other people coming in and make them a part of the stream as well. And then a big one that a lot of new streamers fail on, especially before, when people would start streaming, they'd get real excited because they'd have way more viewers. Keyboard Twitch is way different than regular Twitch in the fact that there's a lot of support for new streamers. So you're going to come in and you may not just have one viewer for a year. Whereas if you're streaming Apex Legends, you're going to have a streamer, or you're going to have one viewer for a year and a half. But in keyboards, you can come in with 15, 20, sometimes even more viewers just right off the rip. And just talk to those people. Don't get too excited. Develop a schedule. We've seen it time and time again where someone comes in, they get those first peak viewers at the very beginning, and then they stream 5 times in a week. And now they've blown through their entire build queue, and they have nothing to do, and then they can't stream for another 2 months. So build a schedule. It's healthy for you, healthy for yourself. Also, when people come in, if you talk about your schedule, you talk about, hey, I stream every week at this time, and you develop that, then people get regimented into wanting to come back, and they know when they can come back, and they can make it part of their daily or their weekly schedule as well. So I think that definitely helps with retention.
Absolutely. So this question is for BadSeed. How do you combat content burnout and dealing with the algorithm? The need to always balance your output of what brings in views against what you want to pursue that might not be as popular.
That is the eternal struggle of doing this. I do want to kind of piggyback off what Osiris said there. It is it's wild when you get into this thing because you feel like every opportunity that comes your way is make it or break it for you. So you have to chase everything that lands in your lap. And the reality is it's never that serious. Any one product, any one video is never that serious. And it is really easy to go into sprint mode and just accidentally never come out of it. And you don't realize that that's happened until you're a couple of years down. It was tough as I got into mechanical keyboards more and more because that wasn't me until I've had so many people reach out so when did you decide to intentionally create keyboard content to get the viewers. It's like, it was never that. Like, you're literally watching me go down that rabbit hole live. And it was difficult because some of my audience followed me that way, and some of them did not understand the hobby at all and felt alienated when I started covering a lot less of other niches. So it is always that balance. Like, the algorithm itself is real simple. We like to think about it like it's this big, confusing black box that rewards certain people and punishes others. But the reality is, as long as you're getting people to click on what you're doing and they're watching it for a fair amount of time, like the amount of time they watch versus the length of the video, that's it. Like, the algorithm's not some huge mystery. It really does just reward you creating stuff that people want to watch. So there's a lot of stuff now that I have to do because I know that it's going to perform really well, or the audience is specifically requesting it. And then I always just kind of reserve the right to do the stuff that are passion projects for me, because without that, like, you're just doing a job. And the reality is, like, most of us in the content creation space are not going to get wealthy. We're not the Logan Pauls. We're not the 20 million YouTubers. You know, like, it's going to be a career. So you have to approach it that way. You have to think about, like, the longevity in the space and taking care of yourself and your mental health so that you're able to maintain longevity in the space. So it is constantly a juggle, but the real short answer is enough of what makes you feel passionate about doing it so you continue to feel good about doing it and it looks and feels authentic. And then every once in a while, you got to do what you got to do to keep the business on track.
Yeah, that actually goes really well into the next question, which is describing, like, making the leap into full-time content creation. Because that's terrifying. You know, Osiris and I talked about that a few times, where, like, can we make this a thing? And when we kind of saw exactly what it was going to be, it's scary. It's terrifying. Being able to hit that certain number. So we'll talk. I know you recently made that full-time jump. So we'll talk about that scary leap of faith.
Sure. Yeah, I think my situation is a little bit different in certain ways, because I started out actually doing full-time build services. So I offered build services for people, and content creation kind of came second to that. I didn't actually ever mean to get into this. This was not my plan. But I was going to school and I needed to earn money to go to college. So I started offering build services to people. I would build their keyboards if they sent me parts. And then I was like, wow, I'm getting so many cool keyboards. You know, at that time I was building about 20 to 30 keyboards a week. Don't do that. But I was building about 20 to 30 keyboards a week. And I was like, this is a crying shame that I am the only person who's able to see these awesome keyboards that people are sending me. So I started into content creation there. So I actually started out, again, as like a full-time build service provider. And then as time went on, I realized, hey, turns out people like you to stream their products. Like, they like you to show off the stuff that they're making, that they're selling, just as much as people want to see you build the thing that they own. And that's kind of how I made the transition into full-time content creation. But it's definitely terrifying. It's a very risky move. It is very scary because it's not particularly stable. Ultimately, you are at the mercy of the people who watch your content, and you just have to hope that they continue to support what you do and that you can make them enjoy what you do as you do it. So it's definitely terrifying. And as BadSeed said, you do have to treat it like a career. You have to consider the longevity of it. You have to figure out a way to make it continue and know that it'll continue for years down the line, because otherwise it's just way too scary.
100%. And for Tiny, what are some suggestions to build a following on TikTok? And I'll be listening because I don't know how to build a following on TikTok.
Honestly, I feel like it's like anyone can go viral on TikTok. So you just kind of just put, like, instead of putting all your eggs in one video, like working really hard on one really, really good video, just quantity over quality. Just toss things out there, and I feel like eventually something will hit, given that your content is at a certain level. Like, obviously, you can't just like throw random stuff that doesn't have to do with anything, right? Like, actually, it has to be like decent content. But if you put enough out there, I think eventually, it's not really I don't think there's no like secret to like using, like obviously follow trends, like use the app as you would normally and pay attention to what sounds people are using, and then try to like fit that into like keyboard stuff or whatever you're trying to do. And then I wouldn't bank on trying to make it big with any single video, but just like keep putting stuff out there, and eventually sometimes randomly things will just go viral, especially things that you don't really care about. Sometimes it happens that way where you're like, oh man, I put so much effort into this one video and it just got like, nobody cared about it. And then you like spent like 10 minutes on this random video and then it just blows up and you're like, why? And there's no reasoning, right? So I think like just for a lot of different social media platforms, it's just like pay attention to what people like and what you like, obviously, and then try to like do that thing, but in your own style, and then just persevere. Because I think like a lot of people get discouraged. They post, like 10 videos and they're like, oh, I tried and it didn't work out. But it just requires you to keep trying until something happens or something works.
Our next question. As the hobby has grown, we get positives like more diversity of both products and creators. But what are some pitfalls that are often not highlighted? I'll put lightning on the spot.
Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah. So as the hobby has grown, we get positives like more diversity of both products and creators. But what are pitfalls that are not often highlighted?
Okay. So I think some of the pitfalls that I have seen, I think, over the years of the hobby grow, because the hobby has grown very significantly, especially, over the pandemic, of course, but even before that, if you go on like Reddit, like r/mechanical keyboards or something, and look up like the subreddit stats or something like that, the subreddit has basically been doubling or so each year, and that's quite significant. That's a power law right there, right? And so I think if you just kind of take a look or even skim through the kind of posts that get posted on Reddit, I remember there was a time like in 2017 where like people would post like pictures of their keyboard with like a shoe for scale or like a banana for scale. I'm not sure people remember that. This was like a long time ago. And then there was a period of time where a lot of people were posting their And Pros with like music synced to it or something like that, right? And then I think there was a point in time where things kind of shifted over to like memes and a lot of shit posting, so to speak, out there. And also like around then also because the demographic was changing, I think the demographic for keyboards has gotten younger and younger over the years. Because keyboards, they're not cheap, they're expensive. And so, but they've become accessible to the point where even the younger demographic can access them very easily. And with it, the kind of commentary around it has also changed quite a bit. I'm sure that like Apiary or Tiny can comment on this, but basically, there's also like a lot of talk around, for example, the accessibility of products. People will talk also about, for example, like counterfeiting or even products that are lookalikes of other things that already exist, and kind of like there's a portion of it that might be entitlement where people feel like, well, like if I want this product and I want it now, regardless of whatever take the designer or the creator has around this, I'm going to make it because I want it to be my own, or somebody else is making it, so I'm going to buy that even though it looks exactly the same as the other one that somebody else had already made, right? And so I think the kind of idea of like, I guess just like people wanting certain products has changed, and there's also the completely other side of it where people have kind of seen like, oh, there's like a meta to keyboards, right? People will ask you like, hey, what's the thockiest build I can do today?
What's the hype keyboard right now?
All right. Actually, somebody, I think I was on Discord the other day, and somebody posted this. The original chart is like from, I think it's like the USDA, like plant soil triangle, and basically had like clack, hop, and thock or something like that. And basically, it was like a scale from 0 to 100 on each side of the triangle. And there's like a middle ground for it where it's like creamy, marley, poppy, and thocky or something like that. And so, but you use these words, but what do they actually mean? Nobody knows, right? And right? You would say you would just leave that alone, but I think us as content creators, because we get these questions often all the time, we have to answer some of these with some amount of relevancy. And I think the biggest pitfall there is that when things are so ill-defined sometimes, and you don't quite understand, like the question's already like ill-defined, the answer, of course, is also going to be like that. And the pitfall of that really is that it's just difficult to keep up with everybody growing at the same pace when you yourself have started from a certain point. So your perspective is already going to be biased. Like, for example, I associate the word thok with Topper keyboards, because Topper keyboards have this like rubber dome that collapses and creates this sound that hits against, typically like on a happy hacking keyboard, the HKB, it's like this plastic noise that reverberates in a slightly deeper way, and people say like, oh, it sounds like bubble wrap popping, right? But so is that a pop or is that a thok, right? So yeah, I think the pitfalls of that has just been that like the perspective of the overall, like the general audience of the hobby has changed so significantly and so quickly over the years. And I think for us, it's to follow products and to follow like the language people use, to follow like the trends people are following. Everybody once wanted that Fiel with Holy Pandas on a brass plate with GMK Oblivion and Shishi on Escape by Mr. Types, right? But that is that still the meta? We don't know. And I think following, like chasing that quote unquote meta is something that I don't think really exists in keyboards, because there's so much customizability. So yeah, I think when it comes to customizability, like I think it's always right to give credit to the people who make things happen, right? So creators, designers, makers out there, and then like people who are like really paving the way and like trailblazing forward. And then as far as like following something that you like or something that seems trendy, I think it's important to recognize that there are certain innovations that really have changed the landscapes. Kind of like people will talk about gasket mount or long pull switches, or super tactile switches, things like that. I think you have to give credit to the fact that those things exist, but at the end of the day, it is still preference, and it is still just keeping it true to yourself, just going for what you like, instead of having to follow somebody else's opinion or somebody else forming that opinion for you.
I'm gonna break the line as far as like one person answers one question here. I just wanted to like piggyback off of that and say, like, obviously I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you say, but I would argue truly, I think the biggest pitfall of the hobby getting bigger, and the thing that I think personally all those things originated from, is the hobby's gotten too big to be one centralized community. The community as a whole has fragmented. It used to be that you could go to one place and you could talk to everybody. And I think ultimately the entitlement or that, as you stated, or the lack of respect for people who create things, or the inability to grow at the same pace as the other people around you, leading to frustration because people are asking the same questions over and over again. I think ultimately all of those things come from the fact that, you can no longer go into Met-Keys and talk to, Zach and George from Keyhole, or like, can't connect with, the creators anymore, or people, and by creators, I don't mean content creators, I mean people who create stuff in this space. I think ultimately everything, you can't talk to the people who are putting together resources personally, just because there's too many people. They couldn't possibly keep up with it. I think that's something we've all run into. I think ultimately the real answer to this is as the community has fragmented, as we can no longer support the community as a whole in one single centralized place, people need to make their own communities and provide that support, and ultimately things will get better over time.
Absolutely. The fun question, we've all built boards and we've all had good experiences, but definitely have had bad experiences. So I wanted to go through the most we're not going to say worst, because it's not like the board was bad, but what was the most unfortunate build experience that you guys have gone through? We can start with you, Eric.
You start with me? Okay.
Yeah, Osiris.
So this was on stream.
It always is.
Yeah, which is fun. But I built a round one canoe. It was a red canoe, and it was with the
Telios?
Yeah, it was either Telios or the Xylence.
Oh yeah.
But it was like right after they released like the Aqua version, whatever ones that were like the next tier up. They're supposed to be real fancy. So I was building it with those, and the plate was way too small for it. And it was just a nightmare. And I've dealt with that before, but I've never had it where you're pushing the switches into the plate and it's literally shearing off the edges of the switch. And so it was just like, it was a nightmare. I got it together, and then like one switch was like, didn't work or something. Like I think there was a ground issue, which was causing like an entire column to not work. And so I was just like, I'm going to fix this later. I was so frustrated. It was like 11:30 at night on like a Tuesday. I got to be up at like 6. And it was one of those things where everything kind of came together, and it was just a bundle of not fun. But eventually Dave ended up having to fix it because I was done with it. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. So Dave fixed it, but it was a good board once it was done. The process of getting there was terrible.
Boards have gotten a lot better.
Yes.
Over the years. BadSeed?
Yeah, I think mine was fairly recent. I hate to do this because I love them as a company. I love their designs, but the Wuche Mammoth 75, I think, was probably my most frustrating build. The thing is, when you're doing content creation, you get a lot of prototypes, so it's like almost ready for prime time, but there's still some stuff in there that might just not work at all. And so there's that, and there's the idea that sometimes just building a keyboard can be frustrating, but building a keyboard is like 10 times exponentially.
Everything always goes wrong.
Yeah, it's so as a general rule, like even though the board came out really good at the end, it was like this weird combination of having like a full mirrored bottom and a beautiful finish that you didn't want to nick, but it also had a lot of challenges in terms of maneuvering things and getting screws where they needed to be, or even manually cutting a section of the plate to be able to get access to a mounting point. Like there was a lot going on with that build. So in general, if I like the build, but I need a break from it by the time I'm done filming the video, like the actual process of building and filming makes me want to throw it out the window, it generally ranks pretty low on the scale, even though ultimately it's a gorgeous build and it sits on my shelf. And I again, love the company, but that one definitely sticks out for me, yeah.
What about you, Lightning?
I think there is one build that I remember very vividly. It was basically a build that was, typically keyboards, they come in a custom like keyboard kit where you just get the case, the PCB, the plate that's included with it, all the supplementary parts, right? Well, this one wasn't like that. Basically, the client had asked me to source parts on their behalf, or at least helping them, and they pretty much asked we got one of those. You guys remember those like Philco cases, like aluminum cases, the ones where you could just drop in the Philco internals into them? Well, we got one of those from AliExpress, gold anodizing, and it really looked more like yellow. And then they wanted 280-gram Taihao Alps switches. I don't know
That's
why.
even bad for me, and I like heavy springs.
So the first thing I wonder was, this has got to be a troll. There's got to be someone who just wants to see me suffer, right, through building this. But I agreed to it, so I'm not going to back out now. And so, we sourced the parts. We eventually finally got this PCB, right, that's Alps compatible and in this Phantom T-Kill start format where it fits the case, right? And, I started building this on stream, and, I had done all the prepping. I had checked that the stabs were okay because these are CoStar style stabs, not Cherry. So you have to make sure all the wires are okay, the fitment's okay, that they don't bind or anything when they pop up. And then not just are the switches super heavy and very obnoxious to work with, but it turned out that the plate that was cut for it had a bit of wiggle room. So the way that Alps switches work, they have these little kind of wing-like flaps on the sides that they compress as you put the switch in. Well, and the second problem of Alps switches is also that they don't have those PCB mount pegs that you see on Cherry switches, the plastic ones next to the main one. Well, Alps switches just straight up don't have them. And so towards the end of the build, we realized that the heft of the switches was lifting the keycaps up above the plane of the board where it should be. And then because of the way the plate was cut, it was a very cheap keyboard kit, each individual switch had some bit of wiggle room. So the keycaps looked completely crooked. You saw it look like a little wave pattern going everywhere. So I had to individually pick out, and because the way Alps switches work, they're pretty sturdy at the bottom housing. So I had to use like you know those switch pullers, but like something metallic, something sturdy to individually rotate every switch so that all the keycaps look nice and straight. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do this right because, you know, I mean, I'm getting paid to do it, but not just that. It's also like a challenge. And so it took me like a good, I think that build took me like 5 hours. Just sitting down there and dealing with it. I mean, I wasn't as frustrated as I could have been just because I was also doing it in front of people that, you know, like are regulars, and they're just there like having fun. They're like, haha, let's watch Diego do this. But it ended up turning out okay. I mean, I actually, you know, typing on it was not as big of a nightmare as it was. At the end of the day, it all worked. The spacebar returned properly and everything. And considering that, I was very pleased. And then I sent it out, and fortunately, like, yeah, everything worked. I was so surprised.
That's all you can ask for,
Yeah,
right?
and they said they loved it, and I was like, well, I mean, I guess that was worth it. But that was definitely by far one of the most frustrating experiences because of the individual switch tweaking, and yeah.
What about you, Tiny?
I have really bad memory, and I also feel like if a weird build happened, I probably just blocked it out of my memory. It was so bad. I'm kind of drawing a blank on like big kind of like fumbles or anything like that. I remember this build that I actually just never finished because you had to individually solder I think it's the SMD, like the light, which is like 4 pins that are super tiny, like very, very small. And that's individually for every single switch, you had 4 tiny little things. And like, they move all over the place. They're so small, and I just had the worst time trying to get them in place and then like solder. So I gave up on it, and I gave it to Minterly, Nat, to finish. She was like, "Oh, I like soldering," and I was like, "Here, you can have this demon build and do it for me." And she has not finished it because she was like, "Yeah, that was terrible. Like, she doesn't want to do it for me." So that board has never been finished, and I don't actually know where it is anymore.
What about you, Apiary?
I have some horror stories. I don't know. It's hard to pick one. There's been boards where I've had to like Dremel out the USB-C slot or room for like a Pro Micro on a case. There's been I had one board of my own that the PCB on it died 3 times. I had to wait like 6 months because with a TGR PCB, get a new PCB. So I gave up and I just Dremeled holes in a different PCB to make it work. But I think like the one that like sticks out to me, it was a correction. I used to offer repair services along with build services, and sometimes on the down low, I would offer correction. So sometimes people would send in boards to be built by someone else, and they wouldn't be happy with the job, and so they would send it to me to fix. So it was a correction from a streamer who I knew, who they did not enjoy the build that they had done for them, so they sent it in to me. It was with the new release of Drop Holy Pandas. So for those of you who don't know, when the Drop Holy Pandas were originally first re-released by Drop, they had an issue with the lubrication, where it was kind of horrendous, especially with the first original batch. So you'd have to run it through an ultrasonic cleaner a couple of times. And the thing with an ultrasonic cleaner is if you run it too quickly through a cheap one, it'll cook the plastic. And if you heat certain plastics, they become very brittle. So this person had run the switches through an ultrasonic cleaner too many times, didn't tell anybody yet, had lubed them not particularly well. So this person sent this in to me for a correction. They hadn't known that any of this had happened. So I asked them my usual questions. I was like, hey, like, you know, have these been cleaned, whatever, like how old are these holy pandas? They didn't know any of that had happened, so they didn't tell me. I run it through an ultrasonic cleaner one time to get the lubrication that had already been done after before they had sent it to me. So I desoldered the switches, opened them up, brought them in ultrasonic cleaner, and I noticed I was popping them out of the plate that some of them were a bit funny. I was like, uh-oh. So I was like, okay, here's the deal. I don't think these are going to last through an ultrasonic cleaning, but they said they wanted to go ahead with it. We ran it through the ultrasonic cleaner. I start putting them together. Everything seems solid. We start to go in to pop them into the round 2 with a brass plate. And for the Singer round 2s, that was during the time where a lot of board makers were making their plates particularly precise. And Holy Pandas, for those of you who don't know, have kind of fat housings. They aren't within spec. So we go to start putting these in. I believe it was on stream. And I start pushing them in. My fingers are like bloody, right? Because I'm trying to get these in. And and all of a sudden I just hear like a ping noise. I'm like, what was that? It turns out that as I was pushing in the switches, every time I would try, one of the legs on the housings would snap off just because of the combination of having been fried through an ultrasonic cleaner and the super tight plate. So I had to message this poor client again. I was doing all of this for free as well. So like I had spent like 5 hours on this correction at this point. I had to message this poor client and be like, hey, I'm so sorry. They like nuked your switches. We got to get you new switches in and then we can like fix this up for you. But it was a total nightmare. They had also used lead-free solder on the build too. So I was like desoldering the thing. It took ages. Yeah.
Well, that is all the time we have for the content creators. Please, thank you. Join me in thanking our awesome content creators. We're going to be taking a quick 5-minute break. Stand up, stretch, use the bathroom, grab some water, and then in about at 11:05, we will start with the keyboard design panel. All right, 12:05. Thank you. Still on Central Time.
Guys, that was great. I kept trying to turn your mic up, and I wasn't sure which one it was. So I just kept like, I turned them all up. Sorry. Thanks. That's why I bought it. I'm probably not going to say a thing, yeah. I was like, good question. Yeah. Like, what time was it? It was like,
get it.
Just make sure you're pointing it like straight. You got a mask, right? Yeah.
No better Twitch TV.
Andy, you ready?
Hey guys, we're just gonna go ahead and get started. So what we have here is a bunch of awesome keyboard designers who've agreed to be part of this panel. Today we just wanted to give you a little bit of insight kind of behind the scenes about what goes on in designers' heads when they're putting together new keyboard designs. We're trying not to focus as much on like the selling, marketing side, but if you guys have questions, I would encourage you to submit them to the forums and maybe we'll get to them. So yeah, I guess to kick us off, I'd just love to go down the line and could everyone just give us a little quick introduction, maybe about 45 seconds?
Sure. My name's Luke Barron. I'm half of Smith+Rune. So we debuted our first keyboard, the Iron 165, back in July 4th, 2019. Yeah, that long. And this is my other half over here.
Hi, I'm Matt. Also, other half of Smith+Rune. Yeah, Iron Series, and now the new Magnus that we revealed yesterday.
I'm Garrett of OmniType. Keyboard-wise, probably know us from the Bauer design, which I guess we're saying dates, were released in 2018, so I'll beat you there. I guess at this moment, we're kind of a one-hit wonder. Just the Bauer released a couple of times. Upcoming, we have our Crane TKL that we just showed off this week, but that's kind of us as far as keyboards.
Hello, I'm AIO3. I designed boards like the Polaris, and now I design boards like the Brutal V2 series for CannonKeys, and that's about it for me.
I'm Josh, Hiney Bush. I've done stuff like the HBCP, TKO1, key sets, PCBs, all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Hi, I'm Bisoromi. I joined the hobby around maybe late 2016-ish, and so I'm mostly, I say I'm mostly a collector, but I also design some boards and as a hobby.
Cool, thanks guys. Oh yeah, and I'm Upas from CannonKeys, so thank you all for being here. So yeah, let's just dive into a few more questions. I think this one's for everybody, but I guess how did you get into the hobby? And as a follow-on to that, how did you get into keyboard designing?
I'll go ahead and start with that. It probably started with my love for StarCraft and seeing all these Korean pros typing on mechanical keyboards. And I was like, ooh, I want to be good like that. I need a mechanical keyboard. So the first one I bought was in 2009. It was a DOS Keyboard 3, like the professional one with no letters on it at all. Typed on that for about 7 years or so before I was like, I wonder what else is out there. And then I think it was the White Fox by Input Club at the time. That was like the first like custom keyboard I went for. And then the K-Type, and then slowly went into GeekHack, then into Discords and things like that. Matt will probably be able to explain how I got into designing with his part of the story.
Yeah, for me, I've been using mechanical keyboards since the 90s, but never in the hobby, just bought them. And I started getting frustrated with them. I have a tendency to deep dive everything. So I went deeper, found the hobby, started getting customs, started losing group eyes. And that's when I got really frustrated and said, you know what, I'm just going to start making my own keyboards. For me, I had no intentions of making a business. And then I realized that it was taking me a very long time and I wasn't very good at it. And Luke is very, very good with mechanical engineering. And that's kind of how we met and we hit it off. And we ended up working really well together. And so it just kind of turned into this partnership and kind of grew into the company naturally and organically.
As far as like custom hobby keyboards, it was probably 2014, I think. I obviously had mechanical keyboards just from like gaming and stuff, but I don't really count that as my like starting because it wasn't really purposeful. It was just get a Razer, you have a gaming computer. So in 2014, I was on Reddit just scrolling through the front page and I saw like a macro shot of an HHKB that was blank with a red escape, and I was like, that's a really nice looking keyboard. So I clicked on it, found RMK, and then it just like went deep really quick. So that's how I found the hobby. I think it was 2013, 2014. And I'm a graphic designer originally, so I try to find design in everything basically. Somehow I end up in it. So about 2016, 2017, I just started designing my own stuff just because there wasn't quite everything I wanted to see with the infancy of the hobby at that time, I guess, compared to now. So I just started designing stuff for fun because I didn't like my graphic design job. So it was just like fulfillment in design in a hobby that I liked compared to boss telling you to make something. And then it just accidentally became a business, basically.
For me, I got my first mechanical keyboard, I think, when I first built a computer. But it was one of those that everyone starts off with, those Cooler Master XT or whatever it was. Back then, there weren't that many options available. I wanted a compact 60% board with arrow keys, because 65% also wasn't much of a thing. And I was poor, and I didn't have the money to afford any sort of off-the-shelf stuff. So I decided, why not learn and design one? I got into designing, and before I knew it, somehow this full-time thing, and here I am.
Yeah, so I first like built a computer, found RMK, found the Discord, like the stuff everyone kind of does. And then I was just like, well, I want to make something for myself. I've always been very into like design and things like that, and just kind of thought, well, I want to make this like how I would want it, not how whoever would, whoever else is designing things how they want it. So I just kind of started just messing around in CAD and in like the PCB software and stuff, and yeah, it's just become what it is now, which is it's just cool to be able to make things. I don't know, just like to make stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what a lot of other people say. So I started like late 2016, I believe, and I was on Reddit, and I found someone linked to Mech Market. At first, I thought it was Mecha Market. I thought it was like a place where they sold Gundams or something like that, like mechas. And then I clicked on it, and I was like, this is not Gundam. Like, this is like expensive keyboard, whatever. And I was like, I'm never gonna get into this rabbit hole. Like, I told myself that. I remember like specifically that night, I was like, who would ever, be into this, And then I just I went on RMK, went on the wiki, just read up as much as I could, and I was like, oh God, I'm getting into the rabbit hole very slowly, and then now here I am. So it's definitely been a nice ride.
Cool, thank you. And this is another question for everybody. So maybe we'll go opposite direction this time. Let's start with Biso. Where do you typically draw your design inspiration from? So when you're designing a keyboard, like where does it come from?
Yeah, so it's also just wanting to design stuff for myself. So, I like to collect keyboards. So there's a lot of design, like features on other boards that I really like. I want to, all my favorite aspects of other one, but also making it my own unique board. That's like approachable, that's simple and accessible also. So, that's pretty much it. Just like wanting, like specifically, like if I wanted, like there's a lot of layouts that don't exist, like that didn't exist, like the FRL layout. I really wanted that, so I designed a FRL board. This was years ago, and then also a 75% Southpaw 75% numpad. That wasn't a thing before, so I designed board. You can see it over there. But stuff like that, where it's like I want something, so I just make it myself because no one else is going to. So try.
yeah, the like internal inspiration of like this doesn't exist, so and I want it to, so I'm gonna make it. Absolutely a huge thing, but I guess more in like the design, like the aesthetic side. I like really old, like not old, but like the Cold War era like planes and stuff, and I just love looking through books and websites and things. So I really like the like clean kind of sleekness that they all had, and they still do. But like that sort of stuff is I try to emulate that, I guess, in what I design, where I like clean, sleek, like no logos. You kind of just like know what it is when you look at it. That I guess would probably be one of the bigger inspirations that I've been trying to follow.
For me, inspiration, obviously, making stuff that doesn't exist, probably my big desire, but also fulfilling challenges is one of my biggest inspirations. In that, for example, if I'm tasked with making a second generation, or if I'm collaborating with someone else and figuring out how to blend design of both mine and someone else's, or just fitting brand new technology in chassis that is just challenges like that require me to figure it out and turn it into practical. And also, as another inspiration, I like vintage keyboards, so I take a lot.
As far as aesthetic inspirations, I can't really think of anything specific. I feel like I have kind of an industrial style inspire me. Obviously, other people's boards, they'll do something really cool, and I'm like, well, how could I do something like that similarly and then put my own spin on it? And then
A sports bra, maybe?
yeah, I mean, key set wise, it's a whole different world. So key sets I get before layout wise or slightly tweaking a layout that I'm like, I really love this layout, but this one thing that's just the standard, I don't like the way that it's always been done. So I'll slightly swap it, and then half the world hates me, but that's just how it works sometimes, I guess. So I guess that's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, so, yeah.
I have the easiest job because I don't have to have inspiration at all. Matt just pushes his ideas onto me and says, make this work in a computer model. And I take it and I'm like, this is dumb. In fact, even the last thing I named dumb idea in a folder. But then I'm like, the more I design and work in it, the more excited I get. And we tend to design by like almost like a panel. So it'll be me, Matt, and a few of our close friends that'll all review things. And it almost like distills down to the best version of something because I'll have this outside idea, like the original badge that I wanted on our Iron 165 was just ridiculously looked like a B-17 bomber or something like that, or a stealth bomber. And, you know, that got tamed in and pulled in and things like that. So it's pretty easy for me. I just get a list of specifications and a general idea of what to do and then just go off and do it. And I let other people make decisions for me.
Cool. So, I mean, Luke, thanks for that. You know, talking a little bit about the design process there, and that's a great next question, I guess. You know, for others on the panel, and this goes out to anybody who wants to answer. What does your design process typically look like? Like, are you starting on pen and paper? Do you use a panel of friends? Like, do you get feedback? How does that work?
I mean, I could just say real quick. I kind of just start messing with the shape in CAD, like more or less start like with a rectangle and just kind of cut pieces away from it until, like, you know, adjust the curve or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, I kind of like the way this looks. And or you end up just scrapping it, putting like that folder that you haven't opened in like 3 years and you never will. Then restart, you know, from the same rectangle or the same shape. Or yeah, a lot of the time it just kind of just happens. On occasion, I'll sketch things out, but like I don't even really know where it's going to end up until I'm like, okay, I'm going to prototype this. And even then, half the time you have to change everything anyway. So
For me, I tend to start on pen and paper. The more complex the design is, the more organic and the less intuitive it is to get it out onto a CAD file, I'll probably sketch it out on pen and paper. Sure. But if it's more of a geometric form that's faster to do in CAD, I'll just start on the screen.
I probably have a much different approach than anyone because I started in 2D design. So I'm much more proficient in Illustrator graphic design tools and barely even know how to use 3D ones and just Google it until I can get what I want. Even to this day, I barely know how to use it. So a lot of times, the idea will start in my mind and I'll sketch it just so I don't lose it. But a lot of times I start in Illustrator because I'm more proficient that way, and then I'll transfer it once I get it down to the 3D program.
We kind of usually our design process starts with me handing Luke essentially the scribblings of a madman in a notebook, and then he somehow is able to convert that into usable something. It's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, so we also live really far apart. I'm in Colorado, he's in New Jersey, so everything we have to do is like just online, getting it back and forth to each other. When I go into a design though, I try to think about how it's going to be machined. So in my mind, I'm like, this is starting as a block. Essentially, how does a drill bit plunge straight down into this? I can't do something at a weird angle or go into it. I have to make it as manufacturable as possible and solve this problem like an engineer would. That's how I kind of go about taking what he gives me and turning it into something that's machinable and makeable in real life.
Iso, anything?
Yeah. So if like AIO3 said, if it's like a kind of complex design, I will. Would want to do it. Like if it's like a weird mount. So like Starman is a good example because it's so weird, curvy. Some works I couldn't just like I had to sketch it out. But if it's more of like a rectangle block, you know, it's just, you just extrude rectangles and in Fusion. So that's not. I mean, you don't really need to sketch anything out for that. So yeah, if it's something like, I think mounting. I do now that I think about it. I do tend to like for mounting styles. Like I don't do a lot of different mounting. I just mount, but still, it's like being able to like visualize it on paper before you go into the program is nice to see and things out very.
Cool. So, kind of after the design process is done, like you have a design, how close to your initial vision do your end products typically end up looking like? How much do they evolve as you work on them? Are they close to when you started? Do they change a lot? Does it vary? So how does that happen? This one's for anyone.
I guess I'll go. I think mine's kind of both. Sometimes, like with Bauer, it looks exactly how it looked on the piece of paper. I don't know if it's just because it was so unique that it was like, that's exactly how I want it to look. There's nothing I need to change about this. Maybe the angle slightly changed, but the overall idea would look exactly like the very first sketch. But some of my other ones are just kind of like, once I get in there, I just start playing with, do I want a fillet or a chamfer? Do I want it 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters? It's like, it's so much easier to change it in the program that in 1 second I can tell, oh, this is too big of a gap, too small of a gap, or too big of a radius. So tons of tweaking just starts happening, and sometimes it'll look nothing. But I'd say for me, it's kind of both.
Yeah, those little details are like the ones that are the hardest to kind of settle on. But yeah, when it comes from what's in your head to kind of how it ends up is, for me, almost always pretty much what I want. I will more or less make it into that. Like whether I have to completely undo and redo something just to change a later feature, whatever it is. Yeah, for the most part, it works out where if it's not exactly what I want, then I won't make it. I won't use it. That's just how my philosophy's always been. But yeah, the littlest details are always the hardest ones to really settle on for sure. Because yeah, on CAD it looks one way, but in real life, it's a completely different sort of experience when you're actually looking at it. So that's always been the hardest part.
For me, I tend to change things up quite a bit in the early stages, but once I decide this is exactly what I want, I lock it in, and after that, beyond the adjusting the small thing, it tends to be more or less exact. Otherwise, I wasn't able to put it in.
Yeah, for us, I think at this point, we work together so well aesthetically that things pretty much come out the way we envision them. I think what's not talked about a lot, though, is, well, the little details, but the little details functionally that go into it, mounting systems, all the little changes, how to mount a daughter board or set up the USB or something like that. What materials to use, different type of options and things like that when it comes to how all that works out. There's a lot of iteration there. Even the changes that took place with our iron keyboards since they came out almost 3 years ago to now, there's been so many changes. So when somebody says, "Oh, it's the same board," it looks the same, but to me, I saw it through the entire process. So there's a lot of changes happen, a lot of tweaks happen, and we're not even done with that design. And that's, we're talking years and years and years and multiple production runs.
Yeah, they more or less look how I think they're going to look. I mean, he gives me an idea. I go through it. I basically whittle it into like a rough shape. And then at the very end is when I do like all the fillets, the chamfers, things like that. Like I had this blocky Magnus 175, and I was like, how do I want this to look on the edges? And I actually looked at the Hiney TKL1, and I was like, ooh, I like those sharp. Yeah, I was like, and the funny thing is, so I looked at that off of Lightning's photos of it. And I was like, okay, this looks like a 0.5 millimeter fillet on the edges or so. That's what I'm going to do. So I'll take inspiration then from like other keyboards. Like, this is the look that we want. How do we finish it and polish it off to be right? So, but for the most part, yeah, I think they come out looking like I expect them to look.
Yeah, same for me. What really helps is that if you have renders, you don't need professional renders. You can just do the simple fusion. Good enough where it'll look a little more real. Looking at it like orthogonal. Graphically, it's easier. The lighting too, it just helps kind of visualize. Fox said it's more of like that's more aesthetic, right? But functionally, like if you're doing like a seamless board, for example, I know I've had issues with it. Like it'll look like that. What that doesn't take into account is like when you put it together, right? The build process. The big thing is tolerances, because you can't really. I mean, you can visualize tolerances, but like it's always going to be a little off, from what you expect, I guess. One way or another, and then going back to the seamless example, it's like maybe something's too tight, but you wouldn't know from like designing, you kind of just take a guess, like will this be too tight, will this not be too tight, or like is this gonna fit, is it not gonna fit? So stuff like that's the hard part. But I think aesthetically, visual things do turn out how I want them in the end.
Cool. So now I'm going to ask some of the audience questions. The first one's for Hiney. What do you specifically want to see from up-and-coming designers and makers?
I mean, I don't want to see people being afraid to fail. A lot of the times, I think people that are newer to design and stuff are not timid, but they want to make sure it's going to be like a hit off the bat, or it's going to be, great from the start. And it rarely ever is. Like every single one of my group buys I've had, there's always been something wrong. But it's okay in the end of the day because people are happy. But not being afraid to fail is probably the largest thing. Make that prototype that sucks. Make something that you send to the factory and they say this literally cannot be made. Like that kind of stuff. But that's how you learn. So yeah, not being afraid to fail and just you get better every time.
Cool. And next we got one for Bisoromi, which is fill in the blank. The blank is so lit.
The audience.
Thank you, guys. Cool. Next one's actually for AIO3 and for me. I'll let you start, Ryota. What does your thought process look like when designing a good sounding board?
I tend to, it depends on the board. Usually I'll try to kind of visualize how different parts vibrate against each other as well as how the airwaves travel through. It tends to be right like 10% of the time, and the rest is just praying that the prototype sounds.
Yeah, and I've had a chance to work with AIO3 over the past few months, and basically what for me, it's always been kind of like experimental. Like I'll have an idea in my head where I'm like, oh, I think if we do it this way, it's going to sound good because of this science, which I totally made up and maybe there's no real reasoning for, but it seems to intuitively make sense. But really for me, it's just like experimentation, right? If you can get a prototype, figure out how you can test as many things as you can from that first prototype so that you can nail the second and get like a really good sounding board. So that's kind of my process. Cool, and then this next question is another audience question, and this one's for everybody. You know, do you consider community trends in your design process, and how do you choose what to include and what not to include, specifically foam? Like, how do you decide whether or not to incorporate foam into your board? So this one's for everyone.
I guess I'll take it first. I guess it depends. Like specifically foam. No, but I guess on the larger scale of community trends, I guess it depends how the trend evolved. Like, I guess this is more of a business consideration. Obviously, you know, I could really love some crazy layout, but if nobody wants it, then that's probably not a good business decision. But that doesn't mean I shouldn't make that keyboard for me. I think we all started making keyboards for ourselves before that accidentally turned into something else. So I would say, like, you know, supporting the community and what the community wants to see is good. I think going back to what was said on the content creation panel about maybe like a meta where people are, we see that a lot recently where people aren't doing things necessarily because they want that stuff, but because they've heard that's what they're supposed to like. And I don't think that's really, I think one of the strengths of this community has been its originality and preference and leaning into what you like. So I guess when I'm considering a design, I'm considering first and foremost what I like, or what I think would be cool, not necessarily worrying about what is supposed to be liked, if that makes sense.
And the hard part with that too is that everything has like a year-long lead time. So what people like right now, they're not going to like a year from now. So with the PC versions of the irons that we just sold, we had sold a bunch to our friends and family before, and like 60% of them were the darker smoke color that people bought. So we tend to skew our numbers to have more of those. And now with the polished stainless steel, and now everybody wants copper. Like a year later, everybody wants copper. Nobody wants stainless steel. So it's hard to take that into account, but other things too, like the new board we just released yesterday, like the no exposed screws in there. We feel like that's probably like a community trend of people wanting like a cleaner, sleeker design, things like that. So we do take those things into consideration.
I personally try not to do anything just because it's the thing to do. If I think it's cool looking, then okay, that's the reason why I did it, not because it's supposed to do it. I'm definitely against like doing things just because they've always been done that way. I don't think that's a good reason to do anything. As far as foam, very anti-foam. I don't think any board that needs foam was complete. But recently I've been trying to be a little less weird in that area and be considering other people's thoughts on that area. So at least give people options, even if it's not the option that I want. But I still don't think you should design it with the expectation it should have foam. But if you're a foamer, go ahead. And what was the whole question? I feel like I forgot it. Am I answering the question?
You got it. You
Okay.
got it, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I guess that's it. Yeah, as far as the meta, I'm definitely against, like I said, just liking things because everyone else likes them. That's one of my biggest pet peeves ever. When they come in and they're like, should I like this? And you're like, I don't know. That's your choice. I can't tell you that. But yeah, that's...
Yeah, I'd say like foam and stuff, same idea. Like I've said it before, like Discord channels and stuff, like good boards don't really need it, but that's always been my view. I don't design boards with it, but if people like it, then you can like it. Like you said, preference. It's all about preference at the end of the day. You just might have worse taste than other people. That's okay too. But yeah, when it comes to like the meta, the trends, it's like they're trends for a reason. Like it might not be cool or it might not be what's what you actually like a year or two later. I think it's a little more important to try to maybe make something that's a lot more long-standing than that, where not quite timeless, but something that can withstand the trends that come and go. And you can always change out the keycap set or something like that. But yeah, I think it's more important to try to make something that just sticks and just works well for a long time.
I think I'm in a similar boat as well. I try to make stuff that's timeless in a sense, in that I see IBM Model Ms from maybe 4 decades ago still being used just fine today, and they don't look out of style. And one of my personal goals is to make stuff that would hold their own maybe half a century from now, and maybe with the right maintenance and replacement parts, they'll still support whoever's using it. And as for foam, I personally prefer a little bit more muted sound, so I like them. I leave them optional. I try not to design them in a way where it's necessary, but where if someone wants it or doesn't want it, they can choose and decide.
So like recent community trends that I've really been seeing is like isolation gasket or whatever, foam, and then seamless, and then kind of spawning from seamless is like what, screwless. So those to me are like not, those were like did not exist, when I joined the hobby, but when all of us joined the hobby, right? Like going back to the timeless classic, right? In my opinion, that's like top mount, because it doesn't use any proprietary parts, like you don't need custom cut gaskets or anything. You don't need custom O-rings, whatever. It's just get some like M2 screws, M3 screws from your hardware store. Just use them in your board, and that's what I like in like my designs, where it's like, or like to do in my designs, where it's like I don't really like the idea of using like proprietary stuff. So in a lot of my TKL designs, for example, I always make sure it tries to fit like Hiney's PCBs, like Zealous's PCBs or Gion's PCB or whoever, any PC. I wanted to make it fit like everything. So I do feel pressured sometimes to like do community trends or go with the meta. Whereas I think another meta is like a low front face height. That's very, a lot of people think that's like very premium looking, and it does look nice. It's very, very sleek, very slim. But I personally like sometimes it gets to me where it's like, oh man, should I try and like do this? But at the same time, it's going back to my roots, right? Just making something for myself. Like this looks good to me. Like I shouldn't have to be pressured into making something just because like people want it or people expect it because they think it's premium for whatever. And I think going back to the foam example, and I'm ranting a little bit, but it's like I feel like the foam thing kind of started on like maybe ARMK or Geek Hack or something, where it's like people had a board and then they just shoved foam into it, right? And then I think eventually, yeah, it's like the drawer liners, the shelf liners,
Sorbothane, neoprene,
yeah, and then I think that kind of spawned its own thing, where it's like now people are like incorporating them in the design, and I'm on the, I'm indifferent with foam. Like I don't design around foam, obviously. But AI03, he put it nicely, where it's like it should be optional. Like no board shouldn't like need it. But I also like I don't want to be like a gatekeeper of like if you design around foam, like if you incorporate, like fine. Like if it sounds great, then awesome. But I personally like to stick to like the classic, top case, bottom case, top mount, maybe a weight. That's it.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, it seems like lots of opinions on foams. Basically, it's all preference. Like boils down to preference, which is great. One of the things I love about this hobby. So cool. Next question. This one is for Hiney and for Garrett. What's the most frustrating part of the design process?
Probably like finishing stuff, I think, is probably a pretty frustrating part of it. You kind of get a spurt of inspiration and you just start modeling something, or you sketch it down, or however the process is, and then you kind of look at it for a while, and like you're staring at it for like 4 hours at this point. You're just like, all right, I hate this, and you just like close it, and then you just have it there for like 6 months, and then you finally open it back up, and you're like, yeah, this is cool, and you work on it for a bit more, and then you just eventually maybe it'll be a thing. But yeah, it's frustrating to sometimes look at the amount of unfinished projects that like I personally have and just be like, oh, maybe I should work on these, but then something new, something not. That's probably the toughest part for me is just getting it to that point that you're actually happy with it and you want it to be made. Like that's
Yeah, same for me. Just I have so many. I feel like it's almost kind of a running joke. Maybe it's just in my head that we only have one board after like 4 years. I have so many that I've designed, but I've just never gotten it all the way done. And then I'm just like, oh, something else grabbed my attention. For me specifically in that is the drawings after you've finished that you need to set up for manufacturing. I hate it. I hate it so much. So I'll get to the end. I'm like, it's done, but like, I really don't want to do that part. I don't want to sit there like zooming in and telling them all the details. So a lot of times they just stop there, and I just have to like force myself to do it.
I just do PowerPoints now. I literally circle it with like red or blue, and I say the blue circles are this thread, the red ones are this thread, and they know what to do, so it works out. Yeah.
Okay, I'll think about that.
I've definitely gotten lazier with all that.
My biggest hurdle is, like I said 1,000 times, I started in 2D, so a lot of these programs I don't really even know how to use. So I wasn't taught. It wasn't something, which I don't think a lot of people here, but I guess I have an idea, and making it actually happen on the screen, I'll be spending hours, and I'm like, I know exactly what it's supposed to look like, but I can't do it. I can't make it happen actually on the screen. So that's probably my biggest frustration, is just physically actually making it.
And I guess we can open this up for other designers too. Like, do you guys have any other things that frustrate you when you're designing?
I can't think of anything off the spot, but I thought it was funny what Gareth said, where it's like, you think you're done, with the design, but you're not, because you still have to do the drawing, and then everything else you have to bundle the files up, right, and then you have to send them over. So you're like, design-wise you're done, but logistically you're not done, and that's also hard.
And then packaging and logistics and all of that is just as much work as the design.
Same with like PCBs, even more so, where you still have to go through and do all the bill of materials, specify all the components. You have to make sure that the fabricator, the manufacturer, can actually source those components. There's a lot of back and forth there, where they're like, oh, this is out of stock. And then you have to go find the alternate part, and that's definitely the worst part.
Smith+Rune, you guys, anything?
I mean, all the pain points that everybody's pointed out, Luke does all that stuff. So I love designing. I get to do all the fun parts, and then I get to skip all the negative parts. I do want to comment on PCBs, though. I know this is like adjacent to this question, but the sourcing of parts for PCBs has been like a multi-year nightmare at this point, and that's probably one of my least favorite parts of the job.
Luke, do you also hate 2D drawings?
No, actually, I wanted to become an architect when I was younger, so I actually started off with like drawing mechanically by hand, doing actual blueprints, because I had to take that before I was allowed to take AutoCAD. And then in high school I took AutoCAD 3D, and then in college I took SolidWorks classes. So I'm actually really comfortable in the 3D programs and don't mind them at all.
Nice. Cool. So this next question is for everybody, and it's required to answer. It's pick your favorite kid. What's your favorite keyboard that you designed, and why?
It's going to be easy for you, right, Garrett?
Yes, this is very easy. I've only designed. Actually, Bauer Light is my favorite keyboard I've ever done, because it was the hardest thing I've ever attempted. Every single thing about it was nothing like I thought it was going to be. The outside looked exactly the same as the metal one, but the inside was completely designed from scratch, because injection molding is nothing like CNC. It's literally the opposite. You're adding material instead of removing it. So when that was done, it was just like, which I guess is technically not done, but I got a real pre-production unit out of a real mold 3 years later, and it was just like the most satisfying thing I've ever held. Like, it's real, it works, and it is everything I wanted it to be, so.
I think my personal favorite board is an ergonomic layout board that I have on display, but that just comes down to layout preferences. Like, I'll obviously design just normal layout keyboards because I like them as well. But personally, for me, when I'm using a computer, I prefer keyboards that are easy to use, and I find ergonomic layouts that are a little more adjusted to the hand to be far easier to use. So that ends up being my favorite.
I'd say probably HPCP, yeah, because it was the first big project where it culminated in me actually having them, and it's still one of my favorite keyboards to type on. Sadly, I didn't bring one. The space bar is like super rattly, and I'm kind of embarrassed by it. But I need to rebuild it. It's been like 4 or 5 years, but definitely that one, just from it being the first, the first kid. The first kid's always a favorite, I think. So.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick, my favorite board might be Starman, which is I brought Starman Junior, which is the 60%. So I like that board, but I also hate it. It's kind of like a love-hate because it was so frustrating to kind of design and get. Not the design wasn't frustrating. It's just more sourcing the parts because that has a lot more parts than my usual designs, where it has like the knob, has a bolt, has the magnetic ball, and then has like the magnetic feet thing. So if you see it in the bag, you know what I'm talking about. But I was just like trying to like, first off, the idea, like it's such a weird idea where it's like you turn the screw and the angle, it goes down or up, right? So I think, I don't know how I just started there. Just one late night, I just came up in my mind, fever dream, yeah, basically. But I thought it was cool because I was like, I just angle was super cool. And then I actually got it working, but this like trying to find like manufacturers who can like make the threaded ball, like a magnetic one, and then make sure it's like smooth and polished, so it's smooth for the magnetic feet. And then the knob itself, I had to trying to find people. That was like a lot of. Yeah. I was like, what do you guys think? So I spent a lot of time on it, and that I think I do. I mean, I spent a lot of time on a lot of my boards, but that one is particular. It was so different from my other boards because like I had to deal with that, and I think I kind of ended up. It ended up becoming one of my most like beloved boards just because like I mean I don't use it all admittingly, but I thought it was like the process was fun even if it was like super frustrating, right? Just like trying to get everything, kind of wrangle everything, and then just making the final product. So yeah, I would say Starman.
Starman. All right, Smith+Rune, you guys aren't off the hook.
Mine was probably, like, if you would have asked me this a couple months ago, I was going to say the Iron 165 because that's what I cut my teeth on, I would stay up late at nights working on it, things like that. And I was worried that feeling would just go away. It's kind of like, playing Pokemon Red or Blue. You're like, oh, that was the original. It felt so good. And then I played the new Pokemon, and I was like, wow, I got that same feeling again. That's so nice. And I'd say I definitely got that working on our new Magnus 175. Which I cranked out way faster than the first one. It didn't take me, 2-3 months. It took me like a week. So, but granted, I was working 12 hours a day doing it every single day because I was stuck in a quarantine hotel. So I would say that one, actually, it was probably the most satisfying to see it go from something that I didn't think I would actually like to something that I ended up really liking.
Yeah, that actually relates to Luke's dumb idea folder. I think no surprise to anyone, I'm going to say Iron 165. It's the board I envisioned for myself. It checked every box that I personally wanted, and it was only ever meant to be a personal passion project. And I think the emotional connection to it, it'll be, there's nothing that will ever top it for me. Yeah.
And I'm also not going to let myself off the hook. I like Satisfaction 75 the best. The answer I should say, as CannonKeys, blah, 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 is the Ripple because it's going on sale soon. But Satisfaction 75 is probably my favorite design. It's just made for me. So it was great. Cool. So next question. Are there any cool keyboard design ideas that you guys have that you don't think are that feasible but would be really cool if they were executed upon? And this is for anybody.
I can go first because I was thinking about this earlier. I think what would be really cool is if you guys are familiar with the G80 5000, which is like a split ergonomic board, but I don't know when it was made. Like it's like an OG cherry board, but it's like kind of rare. I think it costs like thousands of dollars now, and like aftermarket, it's ridiculous. But like, that's kind of why I would like to see something similar, because like I'm not gonna spend like $3,000 on one, you know. So it'd be cool to make one, but it's like I wouldn't know how to do it, you know. Garrett, it's like it's frustrating where it's like you want to do something on screen, but you just don't know how to do it. And I feel the same way where it's like, how do I even start with this? You know, because it has like a swivel system to kind of separate the parts together, because it's two halves, and then there's the space bar. It's like a sliding space bar. Yeah, it's like, how do you like? I don't even know where to start. And that's just because I'm like an amateur, you know, like designer, I guess. So I don't know how to do it, but maybe one of you guys know how to, so you guys can do it for me. But I think for me, it's not really feasible. But it's something that I would like. That would be, it would be really cool to see, because I don't think anyone has really done like you can convert it from split to just a normal board, you know.
Any other answers for this question? We'll do one more, then we'll wrap.
I don't think I've done anything too crazy in my unreleased file, but a lot of people ask for Bower 60%. But I keep telling them the 0.75 U blockers are very important to the way this board looks. I've tried it with 1 U blockers on 60s, and it just looks very wrong. I'm just like, this doesn't work. So I was like, is there a way to put 0.75 U blockers on a 60%? But as you know, there's only so many units wide, so the math doesn't always work. So I made a 60% layout that's 1.5 blocker, 1.5 7U, 1.5, and then instead of your regular 1.5, it's 2 1Us, because that was the only way to make it work. And it kind of looks balanced because it's only like a half unit off. And I was like, this could work. But I'm like, I'm kind of scared everybody will be like, what in the world are you thinking? This is the weirdest thing of all time.
There's been some stuff out of China that's a lot worse, though. So.
Okay, I want to do one, though, really quick. There's an old keyboard. I forget what it is, like a buckling spring or something like that. I swear the plate is curved, and all the switches are flat, to where that's what makes the sculpt. So I need a PCB expert to make like a ribbon PCB that you can solder, so that way I could design
Somebody
the plate
just
to be
released a
curved.
PCB that
rolls
Yeah,
up.
I was going to say I need a
Someone
PCB
just,
that's curved to
interest
match the
checked something like
curvature
that.
of the plate and the top.
I can't
That's
remember
what I
what
want
it's
to do, so that way like a DSA set is usable.
I have ideas, but I'm not willing to disclose them at this time.
All right, so one last rapid fire question, just one sentence from everybody. If you had any advice, one sentence to give to anyone trying to design a keyboard, what would it be? Just starting out.
Ask for help. I'm not afraid to answer questions.
I would say just don't worry about what anyone else thinks. Design for yourself and give it a shot. Don't be afraid to fail. Just have fun with it. This community started with that idea, so yeah.
Well, he stole the easy answer. Design for yourself, obviously, but I would say get feedback from people that you trust, just to get somebody else's mind looking at it. Because when you're looking at it for hours and hours, you might get a little jaded or something about the way it looks, and you're like, this is actually ugly, but no one told me. So just get feedback from other people.
I think I'll go a slightly different route and say, well, keyboards are definitely visually stunning if you get them right. It's easy to forget that there's engineering underneath it, and my advice would be to not forget the engineering part.
Don't design with foam in mind.
And my answer is kind of more general, where it's like, if you're joining like a brand new hobby, don't try to make money off of it, right? I've seen a lot of cases where people join and like for a month, and they're trying to make something for money, and it's like, and then they get burnt out, and then they leave the hobby, and like it's really sad to see. And it's like, again, just design for yourself. Like, don't design to try and make money off of it, especially if you're brand new, you know. But yeah, that's my advice.
I have another one. Can I add one?
Go for it.
If you're gonna in design, a lot of times you're gonna take inspiration from other people in the same space. If you're going to do it, make sure that isn't the primary thing. Make sure that's like a starting point, and then you go from there with your own ideas. And don't be like, I'm gonna take this, and I'm gonna squish them all together, and there's nothing for me in there. It's just all these other people's ideas. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, please, everyone, join me in thanking our panelists here. It was great. If you really want to support them, buy their keyboards. They all design them. So, yeah. At this point, we're going to ask everyone to leave. We're going to have to turn the room for the meetup. We're gonna
Please
reopen
leave.
doors at 2 so that you can all set up boards and all the chairs will be gone and we'll have more place for you guys to show off your keyboards. So we'll see you back in an hour.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.